This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland running the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Hello and welcome to the Chase Down Podcast. The Chase Down Podcast is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio without cable. There is no cost and no commitment. Try it for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Cavaliers' win streak is over, but don't you worry, gang. The good times are still rolling. Justin Rowan remains on vacation, which, you know, I miss him, but I don't miss him that much because we have an unbelievable guest to start today's podcast. Got a chance to sit down with Serena Winters, a sideline reporter for the Cavaliers. So we're going to have about a 20-minute conversation with Serena, and then on the back end of that, we're going to open up the mailbag. We're going to just answer some viewer and listener questions and talk a little bit about the Cavs for another 20 minutes. So without further ado, here's Serena Winters. Hello, loyal Chase Down listeners and viewers. Our parade of more qualified guests than Justin Rowan continues while he gallivants around in Mexico. And in this time, we've got a real treat for you. We've got Bally Sports sideline reporter Serena Winters. How you doing, Serena?
Hey, with that introduction, I'm doing well. I don't know how he would feel about that, but hey, he's probably not listening to you anyway on his vacation.
He's in Mexico. He can take whatever slander I give him because
I want to be in Mexico right now. That sounds nice. Instead, I'm in a foggy Milwaukee. I can't even see out my window over here. We were in Atlanta the other night. Let me tell you, it was 12 degrees in Atlanta, Carter. 12 degrees.
It's really unacceptable. That should have been a brief respite for you on the road, not 12 degrees.
Unreal.
So I think we have to start this interview with the question everyone's asking about the team, about the coverage of the team all year, which is, how did you know Jarrett Allen was behind you when you gave him that fist bump on air that went crazy viral? How did you know? Was it a sixth sense? Did you hear him? It was amazing.
This is the funny thing about just media and how viral things work and all of that is that Jarrett fist bumps me, and he has for years before almost every game at home. He's been doing this. It's not something that he's it wasn't his first time. I just never know when it's coming, right? Sometimes it's, during my hit when I'm on camera, sometimes it's when I'm walking out, but he's kind of always done it. And honestly, people have posted it before, but I think that for whatever reason, did I know that he was coming? No, but I had a sense it comes at some point, and I think it just kind of aligned, and it just so happened that I was on camera and somebody picked it up. But this is the thing about, JA is like, that's just the type of guy he is. Like when we're at home, because I'm always there doing a hit underneath the basket, he's always going to come over and fist bump me. So it just kind of, it's just a moment that ended up going viral. But the funny part was, Carter, that to JA and I, we were like, so that the day that it had gone viral, I had him for a post-game walk-off interview. And so before he comes over and we go live, I look at him and he looks at me and he goes, "Man, that really went viral, didn't it?" And I go, "Yeah." And he's like, "We do this every game." I go, "I know, but I guess now people see it, So that's kind of the backstory behind it. He's just such a great dude.
Well, you looked exceptionally cool doing it. Maybe that was the difference. You just happened to be so in the zone, and you just popped up that fist like you just had a preternatural connection with him. I did want to ask you about Jarrett because he's playing the best basketball of his career over this stretch where the Cavs have been down Evan Mobley, and it was a pretty rough offseason for Jarrett from an outside noise perspective. The postseason didn't go well. Mitchell Robinson kind of had his way in that series, and he got to media day and he was pretty much immediately like, I shut off everything. I took everything off my phone, all social media. And, I really appreciated how healthy he seemed to approach kind of what he was doing. He's obviously grown his game, but he hasn't gone full Michael Jordan rage kind of mode. He's kind of still Jarrett. Can you kind of speak to kind of what you've seen from him on the court and off the court, just as a person, and how he's kind of approached the season?
I mean, first of all, just to speak to him as a person, there is no more likable human being than Jarrett. And it's not just me that's going to tell you that. All of his teammates are going to tell you that. And there's a reason why every time I ask somebody about him, all they do is light up and want to say great things about him, because you always know what you're going to get from him. It's like win or loss, play good or play bad. He's always going to give you that same energy. And that says a lot about him. He's not the guy that wants the spotlight. And I think that one of the things that was so unfortunate with how things ended last year is, as media, you want players to be honest with you, right? Like when you're asking questions, you want them to be honest. And I think that Jarrett really got hammered for showing some transparency and some honesty. And so I think that's just it's just a hard media world that we kind of live in, right? Because then you think to yourself, well, if I'm gonna say that, and we're still gonna see all the quotes out there from, things that he said last year, and people are holding it against him, it's like, well, then what do I do? Like, now do I not be me with the media? Like, do I not kind of try to answer your questions as being transparent as I can? Because something else that's really neat about Jarrett is when you ask him questions, he really does want to give you an answer. Like, there's been times where I'll ask him a question and then he comes over to me afterwards. He's like, sorry, I didn't have an answer for you. I really didn't know. And I said to him, that's all right. Like, please don't apologize. I go, you gave an honest answer to something that you really didn't know. I think something as simple. I think I asked him one time, like, hey, do you pride yourself more in like the offensive end or the defensive end? And he honestly stood there a minute and tried to he's like, but he didn't have an answer. And that's okay. But he's the guy that wants to do that. I know that's a very long roundabout answer, but it's kind of how you started the question, right? Which was the postseason last year and obviously things that he said, but to come full circle and what we're seeing it, turn into again this year, is let's go back to, what was it, December 16th, right? So first game without Darius Garland and without Evan Mobley. And he had a great game, and I'm talking to him in the locker room, and he says that JB challenged me. And he really appreciated that. He said, JB challenged me to be more aggressive. And I dug more into that. And I said something like, why did you feel like, that you needed to have that, or how did you find the self-awareness that you weren't feeling like you were being aggressive enough? And he said to me, honestly, he goes, sometimes I take the easy way out and I just lob it up to Evan. And I thought him, again, internally saying that and being open and honest about that, again, goes to show who he is as a person. And we should not knock him for the amazing person that he is and trying to be honest with us and conversate with us. Like, we should love him for that. So what that also told me though, too, is like, Jarrett just never cares about the spotlight, right? And so he would rather give that extra pass to Evan because that's who he is. And like you said, it's a little easier for him. He doesn't have to do all the work at the top of the key or make all these plays. But the difference is now there is no Evan for him to lob it up to. And he has been challenged. And what's happening during this stretch? His numbers are ridiculous. He's almost 18 points per game since December 16th, over 12 rebounds a game. Those are career high numbers for him. And we're seeing him play now from higher up in the floor and taking advantage of that. We're seeing him really add to just his passing game, his pick and roll game. Obviously he's been, really great defensively, but I just think that people have knocked him for the type of person he is, that he apparently isn't like some aggressive person. Well, yeah, he's not. Like, when you talk to him, he's not some crazy aggressive person. He's just Jarrett Allen, and he's awesome.
Yeah, you're so speaking my language, Serena. Like something like, throw aside being a professional basketball player, like authenticity is harder and harder to come by in the world we live in. We're all living such packaged lives where we're kind of trying to present some version of ourselves to the outside world. So when you see a guy like Jarrett, who is in a very image conscious profession, just kind of being him, he's like, oh yeah, I've got plants and I'm reading The Hobbit and these are the things that are going through my brain. it's really refreshing and really cool. And like, I find myself, I don't root for players like I used to when I was younger, but I find myself rooting for Jarrett for those reasons. He's just seems like a very authentic person who does care. He does like basketball. I think some of the the last danceification of how we talk about basketball is like you have to be a crazy, angry, obsessive to succeed. And like I frankly don't believe that. And like I think you can be a well-rounded, honest, authentic person and still be an all-star level player, because guess what? We're seeing it right now.
Yeah, and we're seeing how much his teammates are feeding off of it.
Yep.
Right? Like that well-roundedness, that ability for him to connect on so many different parts, and his teammates wanting him to succeed. Look at what that did for the group during the stretch, right? Like him telling me that he could hear Tristan or his other teammates counting his rebounds because they want him to succeed so badly. Yes, that's individual in a way because they want him to succeed. But what people don't get is like that was good for the whole team because everybody was buying into that because of, who Jarrett is. And he's just one of the most selfless people that there are. And almost anybody I've talked to has said you can't ask for a better teammate than him. Like that's a guy that you want to be playing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in general, this team has really survived and thrived down the stretch. It's not just Jarrett, right? And this was on December 16th when those press releases came out about the injuries. A lot of people, I think reasonably were like, man, are they going to be able to survive this stretch? And, obviously 13-4 since is more than surviving. And something I've talked about a lot is it's really easy to thump your chest about culture and toughness and resilience when things are going well. It's very much a different thing when the chips are down and you're beat up and, you've had a bit of an up and down start to the season. And I think the Cavs have done more to prove their culture over the last 17 games than maybe over the last 70. And I just kind of wanted to ask what you've seen from the team since those guys went down and kind of what you've seen culturally that has made this possible.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, just about how what you saw them do during this stretch says so much about them culturally, but also about the coaching staff and about JB making changes in terms of how they're going to play, right? You just look at the way in which they're playing right now. It's completely different than they were at the beginning of the season. And JB will be the first one to tell you, he was not an analytics guy. And they looked at the analytics and they're like, how are they going to survive this stretch? And it's by jacking up threes. And I say jacking up threes that's because that's the term that JB has used, right? And you look at the numbers, since December 16th, and, I jotted them down here just as I'm doing my normal game prep. And it's like, they're putting up over 42 threes a game since December 16th. Go back and look at what they were doing before December 16th, 9 less threes a game. Okay. They're making almost 16 threes a game. What is that translating into? Well, they're now making almost 4.5 more threes a game than they were because they're putting up so many threes. And that's over 13 points a game. There's a fundamental difference in the way that they're playing and the way that they're spacing the floor. The paint not being clogged, less dribbling, more ball movement. What I'm saying might sound complicated. It's not, but the simplicity of it is the ball movement and the spacing that we've seen during the stretch. But that started with JB, and you got to give them credit for making a change to how they're playing. And then buying into that. They weren't just like, all right, well, let's have next man up mentality. Everybody's just got to give more and we'll see where this goes. No, it was like, all right, well, let's see what we have. And what if what is going to give us the best chance to put up more points on the board? And it just so happens that they have one of the most ridiculous shooters that wasn't being utilized in their back pocket, and Sam Merrill. And this guy's ridiculous. And also, I haven't mentioned Craig Porter, how big he was during this stretch. as well. Two guys, and that again goes to the Cavs credit. Like, you got to give the Cavs credit and the front office credit for having these like diamond in the rough type players in their back pocket, that when you have like 40% of your offense out, all of a sudden you have Sam Merrill hitting 4 threes a game. I mean, it's been so much fun. So I think culturally, speaking of Sam, something he said that I thought was interesting is like, you know, we kind of get caught in talking about like, oh, next man up mentality, that type of phrasing. And I remember somebody mentioned that to him in practice one day. And he said, well, I don't think about it like that way, because then it's a disservice to all of these guys that are really, really, really good on our bench. And that's exactly how they've played, is everybody has just rooted for everyone in the same way that the guys on the bench are counting Jared Allen's rebounds, is the same way the guys on the bench are telling Sam to shoot that basketball the second it leaves his fingertips. And he is, and he's making them. But what's helping give him the confidence to keep doing that? It's that culture you talked about, you know, with his teammates and with this team that's doing that. And we haven't even mentioned the defensive end, which is what the identity is, because if you're not playing well defensively, which is really what's been the kickstart of their offense. Going back to Jared Allen as an example, we were looking at some numbers the other day, and he's won out of the past 17 games, he's won the past 16 tips.
That's our guy.
The past 17 games, Jared Allen has won the past 16 tips. And, you know, the Cavs have, a lot of the stretch has been like the tone that they're setting to start games. And that's a huge part of that tone. So, I mean, look, Carter, all I can tell you is culturally, I'm around these guys every day. You know, I'm in the hotel right now, you know, in Milwaukee, you know, we'll see him in the elevators. I just got back from practice today, shoot around, and I can honestly tell you that it is such a great group to be around, and they want it for each other, and they've been playing harder than other teams during this stretch. And that's shown, combined with stylistically the differences with, you know, the spacing in the offense and their, I would say, better commitment to defense. I mean, we haven't even talked about like the rebounding numbers. Gosh, you don't even ask me questions. I could just keep going on and on about this team.
Yeah. It's really cool, like to see. And to your point about the fact that the coaching staff kind of evaluated what they had and decided like, okay, we're going to have to make some changes to how we play. A lot of people, when they're under duress, they just go back to what's comfortable. And like, that's pretty, you know, that's expected and normally okay. You kind of, you're up against it. So, okay, we're just going to defend even better. We're going to, you know, run the offense even better. And we're just going to have to ask people to do things that are maybe outside of their skill set. So for the coaching staff to identify the change, and then for the players just to go, okay, like whatever you say, coach, like there are a lot of points where teams with bad cultures, and we've seen teams with bad cultures all across the league over the years, where coach is pulling in one direction and the roster starts pulling in the opposite direction, and, you know, chaos ensues. So the fact that they have been able to make those adaptations, to your point, like, no, it's not necessarily about a rousing speech, though I'm sure they have plenty of them. A lot of it's just like, hey, this is what we're going to try to do, and everyone just, you know, rowing in the same direction. I did want to ask, oh, go ahead.
I just think that transparency has a lot to do with that too. And you mentioned how some guys might just continue to keep like pounding on the same thing, right? More. I think it says a lot when your coach is transparent with you about it, right? And so when JB said transparent, even to the media, like, hey, I'm an old school guy. Like I'm not necessarily that stats guy, and I had to change my approach. He's also like that with the team and with the players, which makes the buy-in a lot easier. And hey, let's be honest, when you're winning games, that buy-in's even greater, right?
Yeah, winning always makes the medicine go down a lot better. Last thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go, which is so obviously we've talked about this different style, and it's fun and it's exciting, and they're winning games despite, you know, not having their full complement of talent. That full complement of talent is coming back very soon. So what lessons offensively, defensively, etc., from this stretch do you feel like the team should kind of be incorporating into their fully healthy roster. What takeaways do you think they should apply moving forward?
Well, I think the threes should be here to stay because I don't know how you can. I mean, look at Sam during this stretch, and since Darius and Evan have been out, he's averaging over 13 points a game. He's putting up nearly 9 threes a game. He's knocking down almost 4 a game. He's got the, highest 3-point percentage on the team. And he's still, I think, number 1 in the league in 3-point attempts per 36, which just adjusts basically because he doesn't play as many minutes as a lot of other guys. But what we're seeing that do is provide more space on the floor. And I think to start the season, we did see, a lot more instances of just, clogging the paint, you know what I mean? And with the pace and space that they've played with, that's opened things up for everybody. They haven't been taking, shots as quickly in the shot clock. They've been getting better shots. So the easy answer there is just the ball movement that we have seen. But a lot of that has been because of the space and 3-point shooting has been a lot better. So that's a lesson just to continue to try to carry over when those guys come back. Obviously things are different, right? Like people do have to realize that having one big and Jared Allen on the floor is different than when Evan does come back, because there are just more bodies in the paint, right? But it's like, how do you adapt with, how do you still have that ball movement and still have, spacing that's gotten so much better with quite frankly, the threes that they've been putting up, still incorporating that, don't get stagnant. We just saw so much stagnancy to start the season. And a lot of that too is just like guys getting to know each other and trying to figure this whole thing out. Right. And so just sticking with that aspect of it, and it'll take a little bit of time. It will. And then defensively, I just feel like they got their mojo back. There's just been a better commitment, especially on the rebounding side, which should not be any worse when Evan comes back and you've got more of those to garner. But one of my favorite rebounding stats is rebounding percentage, just rather than just rebounds, just because that accounts for like just the percentage of rebounds that the team is getting, right? And since December 16th, the Cavs are number 1 in rebounding percentage.
On both ends, or at least it was pretty recently. I know they're number 1 in offensive rebound rate. I know they've been bumping
overall,
between 1 and 3 on defense as well. So it's
rebounds. Overall rebounds, number 1. Like you said, yes, number 1, second chance points. We've seen what they've done with offensive rebounding, but just the commitment to that end of the floor, I think has really given them kind of that mojo back defensively that we didn't see as much at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and one just to yes and you just a little bit there in terms of them kind of keeping that mojo even when they're a little less spaced. I'm gonna quote my absent co-host by saying one of his favorite stats, which is that the Cavs starting lineup last year with Isaac Okoro and Evan Mobley in the starting lineup, so not exactly the spaciest lineup. They had 122 offensive rating. This year, right now, since December 16th, the Cavs' offensive ratings of around 120. like you can. There's a lot of roads up the mountain to efficient offense, but I think a lot of it is about the volume and the choices you're making with the personnel on the floor. And then also, I think people also forget Evan and Jarrett probably only share the floor like 18 minutes a game at most. Like you can still play the same style that you've discovered here, just with an infusion of extra talent. You can play Jarrett in the high post when Evan's sitting now, because he can facilitate at a much higher level. So I think that if there are any people who have anxiety about the style kind of reverting back, I would say I think you got to put a little credit into the hands of the coaching staff and the players. Like they know what's working. They're not blind. I would be very surprised to see them just be like, well, we survived. Let's go back to doing exactly what we were doing before, right?
Definitely. And because we didn't talk about him, but you mentioned him, and you've got to when you talk about the defense, Isaac Okoro has just been so solid. I mean, it's easy to talk about Sam Merrill because the offense and the shot making is always something that's just, it's always a highlight. But they would not be doing what they're doing during the stretch without Isaac Okoro. Defensively, he's just been a menace, and he does not get the credit that he deserves for how important he is to this team during this stretch. He really is. Dean has also played really, really, really good defense for the most part, and he's had some games that he's been letting it fly, and I would love to see that from him too. But this has come from, we spent a lot of time talking about Jarrett. We didn't even talk about Donovan Mitchell, who, I mean, did his name not even come up in our podcast here?
No,
not even.
He's so easy to take for granted because he's just so consistent
right now. I mean, the balance that he's playing with, if you go through and look at like his assist numbers, his rebounding numbers, his steals, all of those up across the board, his points are down. And that's because he's doing what the team needs of him right now. Like, he's let that part of the ego go to do what's best for the team right now. It's amazing that we could talk about what the Cavs have done during this stretch with the other guys and not even, mention Donovan's name, who's been incredible. You know what I mean?
Well, it's hard in a 20-minute podcast when every single player who's been playing in the rotation has been so good. Like,
I know.
We on our last podcast, I said to our guest Mac, I was like, is anyone playing like subpar basketball right now? And both of us kind of roundly agreed no, and it shows in the numbers. I think all 10 guys have positive net ratings when they're on the floor. So it's been a really, really fun stretch. But Serena, I know you've got a busy night ahead of you and a fun game to cover tomorrow evening. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. We really, really appreciate you making the time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to Cavs fans. You guys are the best.
Officially a friend of the pod. Thank you, Serena. Bye. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Guys, I made a rookie mistake. I'm wearing the hoodie when I recorded with Serena. I'm not wearing the hoodie now. Fun fact, peek inside the curtain. Just hanging out with the kids this evening, just wrestling, getting tackled, as you do. And I roll into a big old pool of vomit from the dog on my rug. So my sweater is no longer on. So I'm so sorry to break the immersion and expose the lie that we talked to Serena earlier. But we did, and she was a wonderful guest. Thank you so much, Serena, for coming on. And now, for the last, 15, 20 minutes or so, I think we're going to go ahead and open the mailbag. Justin's gone. I'm solo potting. And so if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to pop a question in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of condolences in the chat for my disgusting moment. And it really was the kind that just sunk into the carpet. Like, you couldn't even tell until you were in it. And I was like, oh, ew. So my daughter thought it was really, really, really funny, though. And I just let her have it. I'm not gonna try to argue that that's not hilarious. But that aside, let's open the mailbag. First, a little bit of housekeeping. Does seem like, since our last podcast, just a few things. Tristan Thompson was suspended for 25 games due to violation of league policy. It is a hit while the team waits for Evan Mobley to get back. No way around it. He will still be around the team and practice by all reports. So, he'll be able to be that kind of veteran leader behind the scenes. But, ultimately, they are going to miss his on-court presence. I don't think anyone expected them to need him as much as they have this year, but he's been really, really good. Though Damian Jones, I thought, gave them really good minutes in the first half against Milwaukee. I was actually a little bit surprised to see him not come back out in the second half, especially as Giannis was just abusing the rim in that loss. And then the other piece of housekeeping is reports that Evan Mobley is starting to get back onto the practice court. which is really, really exciting. It feels earlier than I was expecting. I was kind of on, whenever I see an estimation of a time, recovery timetable, I just go to the very back end of the timetable because I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than, disappointed. And so I was kind of thinking it was going to be 2-3 more weeks before we even started talking about Evan. So the fact that he's starting to ramp up is great. Chris Fedor also reported that Evan would be on a bit of a minutes limit upon his return. So obviously, especially with Tristan out, you would never rush him back for that. But if he's ready early, well, great. No matter how many minutes, because the reality is you really only hard need about 15 to 20 minutes a game right now just to stay on the rails. Ultimately you just need the backup 5 minutes right now. The team's been getting really, really good play out of Dean Wade and George Niang at the 4. So while they're waiting for him to get healthy, I think they're going to be okay, but that backup 5 is going to be something to keep an eye on. And for Damian Jones, you just kind of hope that maybe he can earn himself some minutes and play good basketball and, talk about a tough first game to come into the rotation against Milwaukee, who just abuses the rim. But, he posterized Giannis on an oop. So good to see Damian get some run. And hopefully we see Evan come back sooner rather than later. All right, let's open up the mailbag, and we will open with my co-host in Mexico, who wrote in and said, when the team is fully healthy, is there a benchmark in terms of 3-pointers attempted per game you'd like to see? What would signal to you that the team has achieved the ideal shot profile for their personnel? It's a great question, and I do think, I'm not going to micromanage. If I'm the staff, I wouldn't be micromanaging. I wouldn't be like, if we don't get up 43s, we failed. I don't think that's practical. I don't think that really does much. You have to still read the game flow. Like they had a blowout win, in the last couple of games. I forget which one it was, where they took 28 threes. And that's just fine. I think it was against Milwaukee, and that was fine. But I do think on average, you want to see some degree of volume. You want to see them hovering around the 40 to 42 threes a game, with high variance in either direction, depending on kind of what the scheme says. And again, as we've said on the pod, I don't think that's unsustainable or unachievable once Darius and Evan are back, because the reality is Darius is replacing a healthy chunk of Isaac Okoro, Craig Porter Jr., Karis LeVert. A lot of those minutes are going to be siphoned off to Darius. He probably will eat a little bit into Sam Merrill's share, and that does matter. But ultimately, I think it's not like these are high volume guys whose minutes he's taking. And then Evan certainly won't shoot as much as Dean, but again, we're really looking at 12 to 18 minutes a game with the two bigs on the floor. That shouldn't meaningfully depress the team's ability to get threes up. So ultimately, I don't know if there's I think the team's shot profile is ideal right now. They're getting shots at the rim, they're getting shots up from 3, and they're taking the lowest percentage of mid-rangers in the league in this Evan and Darius-less stretch. So the profile is great. I just want to see more talent on the floor to help support that profile, because for what it's worth, I do think that Milwaukee game, it was weirdly encouraging to me. The fact that, they just got out talented at the top end against Milwaukee. And it's like, oh yeah, just in case you got comfy with, the team of, the overachieving band of misfits, it's really important to have really, really talented players. And I watched that Milwaukee game kind of going, man, it would be nice to have Evan here. So Jarrett has a little help when Giannis gets a step on him, or that Jarrett can just go guard Brooke and come over and be the helper. They're doing a really nice job in drop and kind of keeping themselves out of rotation Darius has been such a killer against the drop all year. Wouldn't it be so nice to have him? So I think, again, I really love the shot profile they're generating right now, and I don't think there's any reason they can't continue to do so. It should just feel better with better players on the floor and more talented players on the floor and more versatile players on the floor. All right, moving down the list. Shoopy says, in your opinion, what seed will this team finish at, and what is the ideal matchup for us of the 3 to 4 teams that we'd realistically face in the first round? Well, let me answer the question first by saying something entirely different, which is that, man, is it going to be important to get to probably the 3 seed, but like even trying to push Milwaukee for the 2 seed, they're about 4 back right now. Is so important because the matchups that you get are just going to be better. But even the 3 seed, you're probably playing one of Indy, Miami, New York. Like, it's brutal. Philly, it's going to be really, really tough. Kind of no matter where you land. I think the 2 seed is probably that magic number because things should settle out enough to where, like, if you're finishing 7th in this conference, like, you're probably just more beatable, like, just at a structural level. So I ultimately think that all these teams should be battling for seeding. No one should be confident because I think every single team in the East except Boston right now could look at a first round exit, and that is scary, especially for a team like the Cavs who, had an unexpected and embarrassing playoff loss and how it went down. Like, the fact that no matter how well they play, I still might think they might get knocked out of the first round. Like, that's scary. And it's part of why you have to care about the process, because the league's so good right now that you can just have a bad 5-6 game series and it's over. Even if you're better, even if you quote unquote earned a deeper playoff run, it just might not be in the cards in a year like this. So in terms of what seed I think this team is going to finish at, this is where I get just a touch homery. And I think this team can get up to 3. Philly is getting ready to lose to Indiana tonight. They'll be 2.5 up on the Cavs. If the Cavs can, somehow pull out a win against Milwaukee, then, we're 2 games out all of a sudden. And the Cavs are playing Milwaukee and then the Clippers. And right now, per Tankathon, the Cavs have the 27th most difficult remaining strength of schedule. And Milwaukee and Clippers are 2 of the hardest 8 games left on their schedule per Tankathon, which is just using current opponent winning percentage. So the fact that, with 40 left, the Cavs have one of the easiest roads in the league. Boston, by the way, is at 29th, so ain't no one catching them. Philly, a much more reasonable 15. I think you can leapfrog Philly if you play well enough. I'm just not sure if it's going to happen, but I just think this might be one of those years where 3 through 7 just are all separated by 2.5 games. And it's just tiebreaker city and things like that are going to determine kind of where seeding plays out. And I think home court's really important for the Cavs. So sure, hope that they get home court. And in terms of who I'd like to see them face, I actually wouldn't mind playing Miami. And I know that's sacrilege because they're nasty. They beat everyone. But I think our bigs do a nice job of kind of gunking up their offense. And I think we can win an ugly shootout with Miami. But really, I mean, I guess if Indy counts, I would certainly pick Indy. Part of me does want to crack at the Knicks, though. I just think this team is better. They learned lessons. They're better in all the ways that the Knicks were way better than them last year. But I won't lie. OG Anunoby is a Donovan Mitchell killer. He's the best guy guarding Donovan in the league, in my opinion. And if our offensive engine goes out, what happens? Are we all of a sudden staring down the barrel of 88-point games in regulation again? I'll be nervous about it till it's time to not be. So yeah, I think that would be my answer, Shoopy. Going to longtime listener, first time baller, and boy, was this a well thought out question that I'm probably not going to answer well. Are there any long-term roster building insights we should consider from the sort of accidental experiment/control group created by Gigi and Mobley's injuries? Or are insights about why the team has performed so well in their absence just limited to playstyle coaching and solving math problems of rotations and minutes? Or is it all basically real-life RNG, small sample size, and we really shouldn't put much stock in any of it other than luck? So, very thoughtful, much more thoughtful than your standard mailbag question. But I think it's a bit of everything, you know? I do think, first off, I will acknowledge some of the luck. Like, this happened and the Cavs landed in the easiest part of their schedule. And even the hard games in that run, you know, Giannis was out, Orlando and Atlanta were on third game in 4 nights. Like, there is context that explains some of these wins, you know, and there is a little bit of RNG, to use a gamer term, where teams were underperforming their 3-point shot profile. They were, you know, they weren't, Cavs were benefiting from some 3-point luck, but I do think it would be foolish not to take lessons away. The fact that you're matching last year's offensive output down this much top end talent, and I think that tells you that the process stood to be able to be improved, and playing guys like Sam Merrill are things you need to keep doing. Running offense through Jarrett in the high post on minutes where Mobley's sitting and keeping him engaged in that way, and not just using him as a straight line roll threat. Like, these are all things that I think you have to build into your toolbox. You know, there's, again, the Cavs starting lineup last year of Darius, Donovan, Isaac, Evan, and Jarrett had a positive net rating. They outscored the Knicks in those minutes. It wasn't a ton of minutes, but they did outscore the Knicks in those minutes. It was the fact that the Knicks had 6 or 7 lineups that were positive, and the Cavs had 1 or 2. So the Cavs have to find optionality in terms of style, in terms of personnel, that allow, you know, as I said on the last pod, allow for some pumpkin insurance. If one style isn't working, you have to be able to pivot. If one player is having a bad series, you have to be able to find someone to take those minutes. Like, you don't get time to figure that stuff out. So I do think there are a lot of insights and things to pull away. And if they're not implementing them wisely, I think it'll be to their detriment. Mr. Stoke asks, Evan Mobley coming off the bench makes sense to me as he ramps up. You think the Cavs do it? I don't know, Stoke. It'll be interesting to see, because on one hand, it's a lot easier to keep someone within a minutes restriction when they don't start, because your first subs typically aren't until 5, 6, 7 minutes into the game, and for rhythm purposes, and you end up eating up 40% of your minutes limit just in that first shift if they start, whereas you can be a little more judicious with them coming off the bench. Also, given their need for backup 5 minutes right now, I think it's more it makes a lot of sense to bring him off the bench, because you can just kind of stagger his minutes with Jarrett, and you can kind of just balance those minutes at the 5 and kind of increase your chances of winning in the short term. And you can also, keep rolling with what you have while you kind of get healthy and while you get back to normal. You don't have to flip a switch. So I don't know if the Cavs do it, but I think I probably would. I probably would do that. So I think that it would make a lot of sense. It's just hard. I can never tell with JB. It does seem like he typically prefers just to bring guys back into the starting lineup when they're back, even if they're on a restriction. But we won't know till he does it. And it's just going to be. And they, by the way, they also might just say, hey, we actually want you at the 4 because we don't want your knee getting banged around by a bunch of big centers in the minutes that you're out there. So lots of reasons to kind of start him, but I think I'd take him off the bench in the end. All right, I'm running out of gas. Bob Schmidt, you are a hero for doing these solo pods, because I'm gassing quick. But I have one last question here that I wanted to get to, which was from Azuma Films in the YouTube chat, which is that since we have 2 in a row versus the Bucks, we have somewhat of a playoff type game too. What adjustments would you like to see JB make? First off, I don't think that the Cavs game plan was horrible last night against Milwaukee. I think they got talented off the floor in some of those minutes. You look at I'm doing some fast math here. 52 plus 35. That's 87 combined points from their big three. On a lot of really tough shots from Middleton. Dame got a much friendlier whistle, to be frank, at home than he did on the road. He got 11 free throw attempts that really helped him juice his numbers. He went 8 of 21 from the field and 2 of 9 from 3. I thought they did, and only had 4 assists. So I thought they actually did a pretty good job containing him. It's just, 11 free throw attempts for an automatic free throw shooter means he had a good game, just no matter what. And then Giannis, I think, was truly the one who presented answers that the Cavaliers, as currently constituted, could not solve. They did a better job in the second half, I say, with some to my voice, because I just think he was playing like he was shot out of a cannon. Not a lot of guys get past Jarrett on their first step, and he was consistently doing it, using his length advantage to create finishing angles, and just, and man, was he playing angry physical. I'll bet Jarrett had to ice up pretty hard after that game. I think that is probably where my only adjustment lies. And I think I would, especially since, you can't put Dean on Chris Middleton, because obviously, he's got to go guard Brook Lopez when Jarrett's on Giannis. And at that point, I'd rather die by Brook Lopez, who's had kind of a weird year, not a bad year, but a weird one. I'd rather die by Brook Lopez than Giannis Antetokounmpo. Brook went 3 of 7 and 0 of 1 from 3. If I'm going to be at a talent disadvantage, I think I'd rather have Brook take 8 or 9 threes. And because I had Dean on Giannis and I had Jarrett helping Dean. And if that means leaving Brook wide open, or getting into rotation and having to do a little bit of a scramble, I think I'd just rather do that, because it's just that with Dean having to, shade in and help, but not be able to completely abandon a guy like Brook Lopez. I just thought Giannis had too many clear passes to the rim. He would just slam into Jarrett. Jarrett would go flying and he'd get a dunk, or Jarrett would get back picked, and whoever was picking Jarrett, his man wasn't big enough to really meaningfully impede Giannis. So I think that's probably the one change I would make. Offensively, I thought that the Cavs just kind of suffered from a tough shooting night, to be honest. Merrill, as always, juices those numbers these days, but Karas's wrist does not look good. He had the wrist sprain and missed some time. He was hitting the backboard and the side of the rim, and just not getting rotation on the shot. And then Donovan had a bad 3-point shooting night. I don't think he took a lot of bad ones. He went 2 of 11. Isaac only got 1 up. Though I thought Isaac had a pretty strong game, despite picking up a couple cheapies early. And then, so I think their process was fine. But again, this is a spot where you just kind of felt their talent, because Milwaukee the Cavs weren't hitting, and Milwaukee was very comfortable staying in their shell on defense. The Cavs had a really hard time pushing towards any kind of, destabilization. They weren't doing a good job of getting Milwaukee in rotation. And part of that is because Milwaukee let them take shots, and the Cavs often missed those shots. So, I think there's some execution benefits. I saw some folks calling for CPJ just to get some rim pressure. Sure, they could try it. But he feels pretty far outside of the rotation right now. And the reality is, it's going to be an uphill climb. Milwaukee is probably better than Cleveland right now if both teams are fully healthy. And Milwaukee is fully healthy, and Cleveland is missing 2 of their 3 best players. So while that's the case, it's going to be hard, and they're going to have to catch them off guard and do some weird stuff. And then if I have anything else to say about JB's strategy in this one is like, hey, just make them think, do weird stuff, because you're not going to win in a straight up battle, good on good, because they have more firepower right now, and they're going to probably be trying to win for their new coach. So ultimately, I'm excited to see how that one plays out. But gang, I won't lie, I got nothing left. I can't solo pod anymore. So I am going to say goodbye. This is our last pod without Justin and Rowan. Thank God, we missed him so much. Though it is kind of a bummer they finally lost without him, because we had a strong case to keep him in Mexico ad infinitum. But thank you so much for everyone who has listened, and thank you everyone in the YouTube chat. It's always so fun to see an active chat and everyone kind of reacting. Just really appreciate every one of our listeners, everyone in our Discord. Again, if you want to contribute to our Discord and contribute to mailbags like this, you can send a screenshot of a 5-star review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. If you are a fan of the show, go ahead and subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, cook those books. If you're a fan of the YouTube, make sure you're liking every single video, boosting that algorithm. If you're on YouTube right now, go check and see if you're actually subscribed. A lot of people aren't. So let's boost those numbers, get this thing in the algorithm. Thank you so much for everyone who supports this podcast. I love you dearly. Thank you so much to Serena Winters for coming on. Thank you to Mac, Ty Windish, all our guests. Really appreciate you. Have a good night. And as always, go Cavs.